You're listening to a podcast from thespoilist.com. Welcome to First Contact After Dark, the same as regular First Contact, but with more I'm Andrew.
I'm James.
And I'm Alex.
This time we have been watching The Host. It first aired the week of May 13th, 1991. It was written by Michelle Horvat and directed by Marvin V. Rush. James, what is this one about?
Dr. Crusher has a boyfriend, Odan, a Trill ambassador, who is negotiating between the peoples of two moons, so generic that no one even bothered naming them properly. When going to the planet hosting the talks, he refuses the transporter, instead preferring the shuttle. However, it's attacked upon leaving the Enterprise, leaving him fatally injured. On his deathbed, he reveals he is merely a host body and that the Trill are a joined species and his symbiont is the real Odan, who must be saved. With the Trill host days away, Riker offers to be the host to try help save the peace, leaving Crusher confused that the man she loves is in the body of her friend. Convincing the generic aliens of his identity, peace is negotiated, but Riker's body rejects the symbiont. A new host arrives just in the nick of time, but it's a woman. Crusher explains that it is perhaps a human failing that they can't get used to the person they love changing so much, finally outing herself as a David Tennant-era Doctor Who fan.
Well, Alex, you'd never seen this episode before. What did you make of it?
Well, I mean, I guess an episode like this should put us on discussing certain issues. The kind of issues that get you clocked by Andrew Neil's woke watch, apparently. But
don't give them attention. They want attention. Don't give them attention.
I don't think anyone's going from this to watching GB News. And if you are, take the advice of the previous episode. Oh.
They are over 60.
They are all over 60 and have nothing to contribute to society. It should be an episode that has us discussing issues. There are clearly parallels with trans issues, yet I feel that it's a bit of nothing. In many ways, it's not bad, but it doesn't do some of the things that it could do, and it sort of loses its way in the second half quite a lot, and then only regains it a little bit at the end, and only marginally.
Do you know what? I'm relieved that it was just a bit of nothing. Because my memory of this ending is that it was quite offensive. That it was just, she's a woman. Oh, well, of course there can be no romance between two women. But actually, they kind of hint at it. They don't outrightly refuse it in the way I think, even in the early 90s, another show would.
I'm just relieved that we didn't get Graham Linehan on as the guest for the podcast.
He's been asking, you know.
It was an 11th hour decision to just knock him off, and it's proved to be a good one.
I don't think that the episode we maybe want this to be, it's not that. I think while there are hints of it, it's not got enough in it that really is terribly meaningful. It's more a kind of science fiction idea. I think maybe there is a little bit more depth to this. I think Deep Space Nine would do this better, and
they do it better.
Well, they do it better, and far more interesting and meaningful episode about.
They even have a lesbian kiss, the first gay kiss in all of Star Trek.
I don't really know what this is about, because obviously when you get usually a Troy episode, it's a romance. So the other female character, we've got Crusher here, and we're doing a romance episode. So immediately it makes you go, oh, we're doing this, are we? They've got a boyfriend of the week. And how they'll probably turn out to be a wrong'un, because there is that hint at the start, in the teaser.
Hey, it's not absolved of that. There's still some elements of that we'll get to.
I mean, and I think the thing is, he's kind of creepy, isn't he? Like, I really don't. I don't know if it's just that they don't know how to write men, women, romance, or if at the time people really did act that weirdly around each other, and I'm not invested in the relationship for a number of reasons. One, he just seems a bit odd. They are setting him up as that because they play the tense music sting as he, although this is completely normal to him, he goes, stares in the mirror and lifts up his top. And Troy obviously senses something up with him, and he's not revealing the truth about himself. And then, while in the middle of a professional meeting with Picard, he goes, yeah, what about Dr. Crusher? I'm hitting that. Do you think she'd maybe come away with me? And it just seems like, don't have that conversation in that context. That's not appropriate. Why are you doing that?
I mean, all of that is unsettling, but I mean, I think if we're being honest, perhaps the most unsettling thing is his diamond-shaped pubic topiary. No one shaves their chest hair into a diamond. That's the sign that there's something seriously wrong with that man.
It's all the style for Trills.
Do you think it was maybe that they'd built the chest prop and the person had put that kind of hair on it? It was like, well, we'll have to match his body now. I wasn't really sure what body hair looked like, so I just did a diamond. Is it not a diamond?
It is a bold choice.
It's straight. I mean, obviously, it is difficult to do this sort of thing, and we saw it done very well in the previous episode, Half a Life, setting up a romance in the space of an episode, and us supposed to be invested in it. And here, I don't know. Like, it's nice to see Crusher happy, but there's so many cliches, like, I'm going to the beauty salon because I'm a woman, and that's what I do when I'm in love.
Well, but it's a futuristic beauty salon. It's a futuristic one, so she's got her nails dunked into some awful bowl of Svorfiga or some whatever the hell that green goo is.
Yeah, and
futuristic.
I'm genuinely concerned that the Federation are using Bolians as a slave class. Because they're always a Bolian barber. Maybe that's just what they'd really like doing. But
my wife did point out that he's not a very good hairdresser, because, I mean, I know not enough to be able to comment. Either he's cutting the hair above his hand or underneath it, whichever way around it is. Apparently, it's wrong. Take it up with my wife if you want to know more.
It's futuristic scissors. So was that Bolian, not Mott?
I don't know. I remember before I said one of them was Mott, and I was accused of being speciesist because it wasn't Mott. It was an earlier Bolian barber. So I would never presume that every blue barber is Mr. Mott.
I'm gonna look on Memory Alpha to see if that's Mott.
I assume that at some point we've made a Blue Man Group reference, so if anyone's listening and expecting that, let's just assume that we've covered it previously and we'll move on to the next.
No, it's not Mott. It's Bolian Barber. That's what he is.
Well, that's an unfortunate bit of nomenclature, isn't it?
I mean, see, that this is giving me even more concerns. Isn't even granted a name.
We don't know. That might just be his name.
Oh, yeah, exactly.
You know,
he was always determined to have that job based on his role. I would like to say that I do think that there are two huge missed opportunities, and we can get into it in more depth, but I think it's probably worth stating up front. two big points where it misses the chance to do something interesting. One is that you have the element of Beverly saying, "Oh, I've only known him for 10 days, but it seems like I've known him for years." Now, were I writing that script, and had I written that line, I might consider the fact that if it felt like you had known him for years, and that it was a symbiotic relationship with a being living inside a person that could therefore have been inside of someone else, that maybe it might be an opportunity to link it to someone that Beverly has met in the past, whether we have seen them or not. Which would therefore also deepen the feelings that she has later on in the episode.
On that, if I were a writer, I wouldn't say has it only been 10 days. I would ask how long it had been, because then that implies that you're not aware of the passage of time, and that's just a better line. But anyway, that's just the writer in me.
No, fair criticism. And two, it seems to me a bit of a missed opportunity that, as well as there's a bit of a problem in the world building, that once the symbiotic relationship takes place, that the Trill completely dominates the body of the host, rather than the host having the host's memories as well as the Trill's memories. Because then that would have created more cognitive dissonance for Riker and would have made for a more interesting episode from more than one person's point of view. Rather than it just being from Beverly's, you would have to consider the Riker element as well, and it would be a lot more interesting.
Which is exactly why they changed the Trill species in Deep Space Nine to exactly that.
Not a surprise. It's such a missed opportunity.
This is very much first appearance weirdness. It's written as a one shot, but obviously they have Jadzia Dax, who is a regular on Deep Space Nine for the first 6 seasons, followed by Esri Dax, and you get to explore Trill culture. But the individual and the shared experience are blended, and yes, absolutely, there is. This is more like the sort of Stargate SG-1 Goa'uld, where it's just somebody taking a body, because it's quite strange. You don't really understand the world building of the society in that. It's just like, yes, here I'm about to give up my entire self and my personality to give it to this they call it a parasite. Obviously, that's not right. It's a symbiont, but you don't get any sense of why is this person willing? Is this bad? And you never question it being anything. Well, you maybe do, but the script certainly doesn't actually ask those questions, which seems very strange. And then I think there's also the question of consent when it comes to Riker's body, because it seems to me that they sleep together when he is Riker and she is Crusher, and I don't imagine that's what he was volunteering for when he signed up to. I mean, maybe this was just
it's Riker.
This was all an elaborate ploy by Riker in order to it's the one woman on the ship he's not slept with, so he just sets this whole thing up. But yeah, I think that's also a question not asked. Maybe you can put that down to this being aired in 1991. It's the whole episode, all the things that they possibly could explore, they don't.
Although conversely, there's also the element of when we were saying about the potential route that this could have gone down, where there's a sort of trans issue around it, which there is a little bit towards the end. It kind of does both angles at it in the same episode, and doesn't give either one the appropriate level of exploration that it should, because clearly that analogy doesn't work when it's this person that you have feelings for being put inside the body of someone you already know. Clearly that is then a completely different issue. But then at the end, putting it into a woman's body, it's then almost as if at the end they've gone, oh, well, we could have this as an issue of what do you do when your partner decides to transition. Well, we'll put it in as an afterthought, and then it's there. Oh, and it's done. It's done. And it's so unsatisfying as a result.
I think that they're as sensitive as they could have possibly been in the early 90s. And if you think about it, this is a show where there is talk that one of the producers, and I won't name him, but there is talk that one of the producers was very anti any gay storylines or LGBTQ plus storylines of any
Is it
type.
someone we've taken the piss out of?
No.
Oh.
No.
My guess is not correct.
Gene Roddenberry was very open to these ideas. You know, if you go back to Captain's
I bet.
Holiday, he wanted men kissing men, women kissing women. He was open to the idea of everything being open in the future. You know, he was progressive in that sense. He may have had a very kind of old-fashioned attitude in some ways, but in other ways he was very progressive. Hence
Have
why
sex with what you want. I don't care as long as I can watch. That sort of thing.
Which is laudable in a way.
Just images of of Gene Roddenberry transported forwards in time. What is it you say you are? You're pansexual? You have sex with pans? Well, it sounds good to me. Have you got any of it on tape?
And, you know, this is a show where a couple of seasons ago they wanted to have two men holding hands in 10 Forward. And they had somebody from the studio come down to make sure that never happened. I think the fact that they've managed to sneak this in the early 90s, I think, you know, it could have gone further, but we're looking at it 30 years later.
Let me clarify. It's not that I don't feel it goes far enough. I'd just rather they hadn't bothered with the bit at the end, because I'd rather they were consistent on it being one thing rather than jamming that in at the end as an afterthought. Put it that way.
But do they still manage to make a point by including that?
Vaguely. The thing is that Star Trek can do is it can discuss things in a science fiction setting that might not be acceptable on other television programs of the era. And the fact that it, you know, to just have a lesbian kiss in Deep Space Nine, they have to go, well, we were lovers, heterosexual lovers in a different life. Okay, we get that representation in through a science fiction story. Or we can have an interracial kiss because they're controlled by an alien. Or, you know, and we can hint at this here, but I don't think even then it's really going far enough. Because like, you didn't have to necessarily have it as a consummated relationship or anything like that. I do think it somewhat muddies the waters of the episode and what it's actually about. But there is elements of that. It's like, because they do kind of ask the question, it's, what is love? Crusher literally says that thing. Is it looking into someone's eyes? Is it the touch of their hand? Is it a body that you love, or is it a soul that you love? And that is an interesting question, and that is the thesis of this episode. But putting it in Riker, just someone you already know, it dilutes that so much. And then you've got the kind of the Troy element where she's having the conversation, giving the advice, and clearly being quite distraught by the whole thing. Is, you know, it plays more as an intership love triangle, which again isn't a big element of it, but I just think you could have done a much cleaner version of this particular story.
Or if you wanted to make it more complicated, by having Riker retain his memories. That would create for such a more interesting, conflicted character.
And there's that one scene where Picard says, you sound more like Will Riker, and then I was expecting him to go, yes, we blend and I gain their experiences as well as all my memories, but they just like, no, move on to the next scene.
No, I'm an entirely different man. Can you not tell by my jazz pajamas that I will now parade around the ship in?
Have you noticed I sat in a chair normally today?
It really is a blue velvet nightmare that he's wearing.
Casual clothes in the future are very horrible.
They're all very loose-fitting. They all look as if just a gust of wind would cause them all to just fall open.
Yes. I suppose the thing we need to slightly talk about is I guess the reason this is all happening, discussing peace on Alpha and Beta Moon.
Isn't it strange that the whole episode was originally written about these aliens at war and Odan having to come in and save them, and the whole falling in love with Crusher aspect was added in later.
I mean, that is extraordinary, because that is no basis for an episode. It's a bit season one. There is no interesting drama in these. They're the most generic aliens. They have nothing about them. It's like, when they're giving the exposition in one of the early scenes where they're saying there's a dispute over power production on this one, and then they mention global warming, and you think, oh, is this going to be something interesting? Are they going to talk about that? But no, there's literally nothing there whatsoever, and that you basically don't even see any of the negotiations. You just have him going, I was here, I remember you when you were a young man. And again, there's interesting ideas there, like somebody negotiating the same thing generations down, having the experience of that past, and having done that. I guess if you're making it today, you'd probably flash back and have the negotiations then and now and draw some parallels and stuff like that. But
well, you could play it up as well if you're talking about the previous generations and the idea of one person that purely by this symbiotic relationship was there talking to the descendants, and the descendants having one view of what happened, but the person that was actually there, but obviously none of that happens. I do actually comment to my wife of, well, they couldn't be bothered to make the alien races different this time, so they just gave them a different coloured costume. It's the blue hats and the red hats this week.
Well, it was very much the cat arc from Red Dwarf. There was one planet and two sets set off to different moons, and now they're having a fight. And yeah, I
did briefly mishear it as Button Moon, which I think would have been a far more interesting plot twist.
The ticking clock again. It's the problem. It is the problem. Again, you wouldn't want this as a two-parter, but you have 10 minutes with this guy that you find quite creepy. And then you have Riker, and he's rejecting it, and there's the ticking clock of, can they negotiate peace before he dies, essentially, or the other Trill gets here. And you're just not invested in that element of it at all. You don't really care about that peace being negotiated, because fine, it's just not very well set up. In all terms, the world building here isn't good, and you also don't really believe that Riker's going to die. So you're left with the interpersonal stuff, which it's just not satisfying.
It's certainly true that you don't have many dramatic films that revolve around, that's main dramatic focus is, will the ambulance arrive in time? It feels very season 1-2, doesn't it? The whole second half of this, it just feels like that's what we're focusing on. That's the dramatic focus. I mean, I realise there's a tension, but it's not dramatically interesting. It's just a ticking clock, and a ticking clock is nothing really.
And it's not really the focus at this point. It is all about Crusher being in love with Riker with a worm inside him.
Oh no, sorry. Let me rephrase. I mean the ticking clock for that negotiation element in terms of Riker getting iller. So the B plot,
and the resolution to that B plot is him opening a door and going, and them saying it's been 6 hours, and then going, that was worth it. That's it.
Yeah, that was awful.
But then it's accelerated by, they say, the Trill can't get here. Why not? Have they been attacked? They've been delayed. What? It's just like,
leaves on the track.
They've not even bothered to write a reason why they're having trouble getting there. Oh, it's engine trouble. There's literally a lot of this stuff feels like a first draft to me, or maybe an 8th draft written very late in the day, because none of it's fleshed out properly, from names to just reasons for things happening. And I think the interesting thing that they did do is, the third Odan that arrives is, they have made them, they've given them a very similar look to the first one, and so there is that element of, you could fall for them as Riker, but you can't fall for them like this, and I guess that's the big thing. It's like, can you see through anything? So as we've said, that muddies the water somewhat, but it's like, can you love them as this person? Okay, well, can you love them as that? But there's just not enough time to properly explore that.
But potential question, I genuinely don't know the answer. Would this be more interesting if it wasn't Beverly and it was Troy? Because of the prior existing but collapsed relationship between the characters, or if it was Beverly and Picard. I don't know if that adds an extra dramatic element. That this new person that you have affection for, but in the body of someone who you have been with and have written off the relationship with. And yes, I am aware that the Riker and Troy later getting back together come the end of the film series.
Yeah, I think it probably would be more interesting from that point of view, because
just adding another element to it, that's all.
Yeah, and I think you could have done more with Troy in this episode as well. And there's also, I guess, the element of her being an empath, and them, and in some ways, if she sees people differently, and it's not about the body as much because she senses their mind and their thoughts, and that's something that is intimate and meaningful as well, which would be a good way of using that skill, which is never properly really done.
Here's the third angle, and this is perhaps the most interesting of all. Let's say that this occurred at a time when Riker and Troy were getting back together, and then you have the Trill that Beverly has feelings for being put into Riker's body. If you're going down the love triangle route, that would hugely amplify that element of the story, and yes, you would be able to play in Troy's reading and not being able to read him, etc. You know, they just seem a lot more interesting dramatic routes that you could go down, basically.
Yeah, and I guess there's also the we need Riker angle, which isn't even sort of, once he's gone, it's like, oh, well, we didn't need him this week. But there could have been a dramatic sort of impetus for, we need to do this thing, and he's the only guy, but you're occupying his body right now. What can we do about that? And then maybe they have to make a sacrifice. Riker's sort of agency, other than saying, I volunteer, doesn't come into it. So yeah, there are so many possibilities, I think, with this story, and what we got is hints at all of them without it being particularly interesting, and having a B plot which is just competent. Basically competent is probably what it is. And yeah, I don't think it's bad, but I think after the episode we had the previous week, which was a very nuanced and interestingly explored episode, having another one which is another short setup romance with a twist that there's something they're hiding about themselves again, this is always going to be found wanting. I think I think it would have benefited from not following on from Half a Life.
We do see Data volunteer to be the host. Makes me think what would it have been like if some of the other characters had have volunteered. You know, what if Worf volunteered? What if it was in Geordie or O'Brien?
I mean, it is that thing of Data both being a genius and an idiot, and you think, why on earth would you think that would work with you, Data? Like, you can't give a blood transfusion. Why do you think an alien's going to be hosted? Where's it even going to go? But yeah, you are right. I think it might have been more interesting in another, like if it was in Worf, like would that show another side of Crusher's prejudice? You know, or even the question, is behaviour which you find compelling in someone that you physically find attractive, does it instantly become creepy or inappropriate when it's in someone else that you don't? And again, we're doing the terrible thing of not reviewing the episode that's in front of us, but trying to come up with a different one that we would have preferred, which isn't fair on the episode necessarily.
You know, they do hint at that at the end. You know, you have Odan kiss Beverly's hands as they're saying that they do love each other, but, you know, it can't work. So it is that kind of idea that you see Crusher, and I think Gates McFadden puts in a good performance here with what she's given. And you do see her kind of, maybe not recoil, but kind of a little bit surprised that, well, basically a woman is kissing her hands. She didn't expect it. And it is that idea of the behaviour coming from somebody from a different Odan, not the one that she fell in love with.
And again, in other first appearance weirdness, in Deep Space Nine, it is sort of made clear that it's, while not forbidden to associate with your past hosts' lives and romances, it is very much frowned upon. It's a bit of a taboo. And although Deep Space Nine just ignores that with Ezri Dax completely, and in some ways with Jadzia having a past relationship with Cisco, so yeah, I mean, there's bits of that maybe not necessarily as part of their cultural traditions they would instantly go, yeah, let's just pick up where we left off.
You do get the feeling that the Trill Society, at least in this episode, the Trill Society just feel that they don't have the boundaries that we have, which is exactly what Crusher says at the end. And she describes it as humans not having advanced to that point, which I think is where they word it in a way that I do think for 1991 is laudable.
And another thing is just the sort of retconning of Trill, in that no one knows anything about them. We don't know anything about the Trill. And then, there's loads of them in Starfleet in a few years, and in Deep Space Nine, and in, the Enterprise Con in the movies, and they just seem to sort of always been there. A bit like the Ferengi seem to have been retconned into societies and having been around despite apparently being new at the start of TNG. But really, none of that matters.
Not when there's a cheap alien costume.
Yeah, I mean, and that makeup doesn't even make it to Deep Space Nine, although they did do a test with it.
Yeah, they did a test, but it just didn't work with Jadzia Dax.
No, the spots are much better. Anyway, are we done? Does anyone want to say anything else about this?
No. I think I'm just glad that the episode didn't end on a note of Riker coming back around and going, God, I have no memory of what happened. What did happen? I did what with Beverly? Da-da-da-da-da-da. Hey! At least we didn't finish with that.
The Odan host at the end, before she's joined with Odan, she just has the most vacant acting I've ever seen, which I assume is intentional. They've told her just to act like a blank slate. That is what they just imagined that the hosts are of the Trill Society. They just have no personality until they get their worm.
Well, let's talk about a couple more things. I mean, I don't want to hang around too much longer. In Quickfire.
It is with nervous trepidation once again this episode I turn to my well-thumbed copy of the Nitpicker's Guide. Not well-thumbed because I've read it, just bought it second-hand. It was a penny on Amazon. But I was slightly nervous about Phil's entries for this episode. I won't read one of his points, but he does seem to be particularly incensed that Beverly's boyfriend wouldn't warn her in advance that he was a Trill, that he's hiding a secret, which, considering certain other parallels, is a little uncomfortable. But we'll ignore that point. We'll skip past that one, and we'll go to one of his other plot oversights. Phil believes that he's seen a major flaw in the episode. He says, there is a minor tension point in the plot near the end, when Dr. Odan can survive in stasis for only a few hours, and the host is still 9 hours away. To avert Odan's demise, the Enterprise rushes to meet the Trill ship at Warp 9. What's the rush? Why not just implant Odan into another person on the Enterprise? Crusher could look around the ship and find a good-looking, well-muscled young man and plant Odan in him. Or better yet, maybe she could just put Odan in Picard. At one point in The Naked Now, because, why not go back to that high point, Crusher was very interested in an interlude with him. An interlude, okay. Better yet, why not just implant Odan in herself? That way, everyone would be happy.
Well, that's a disturbing insight into a troubled soul, isn't it?
That brings us conveniently on to Memory Beta, which informs us of a comic in which Odan returns. And the Enterprise is helping Odan with some problem, but the new host dies, and Crusher has to serve as the new host temporarily in order to cure a deadly disease.
What do you think of the Picard Crusher stuff in this? Because I guess that's an ongoing, if completely ignored, thread in TNG. That Picard and Crusher have a relationship, and he seems to be quite appalled at not appalled, but surprised the way Odan is talking about her, and he offers a shoulder to cry on with her dealing with the various changes.
The hug at the end, near the end, was very surprising.
It just doesn't feel much of anything to me. And again, like we were saying earlier, I feel like if it was going to be something of anything, it would be better if the Trill was in Picard. But then that's a bad story. I don't know. I feel like we're so far removed from that at this point.
Yeah.
That it feels weird to dwell on it.
Gates McFadden was quite pregnant at the time. Jonathan Frakes noted, and that the episode had to be shot in such a way that we couldn't see her stomach. They would not address the fact that the actress was pregnant. It was an interesting problem. You really found yourself more concerned with hiding her with furniture or with your body and shooting from her boobs up. That was very restrictive. Gates McFadden recalled, some people were outraged at any hint of homosexuality in the episode. Why are these people watching Star Trek? I don't think they understand what it's about. But Marvin Rush disagreed with claims that Beverly's rejection of Odan in a female body was homophobic. Most of the people I've talked to thought the show worked pretty well and were entertained. Some commented that they were unhappy with the ending because it was left a question. There was, or could have been, a sort of homosexual aspect to it, and we chose not to go that route with it. Yeah, it's very comfortable talking about that.
I think the fact is, in the 90s, the early 90s in particular, it was much less acceptable by the audience, unfortunately. And they had to toe the line, didn't they?
I was just going to say, I've just read the rest of his quote, which said, I felt it was more about the nature of love, why we love, and what prevents us from loving. To me, the best analogy is if your beloved is turned into a cockroach. Could you love a cockroach? It's the same person if the person is the personality and core within, but you can get past the outside. We as humans are affected by the whole package, including the outside shell.
Oh, someone's read Metamorphosis. I would just say, in terms of the 90s, that it is worth finding on YouTube. I'd say finding on YouTube as if our little recommendation, we're recommending a small artist, when what I'm actually going to direct people towards is a video by a New York Times best-selling author. Lindsay Ellis's video essay on trans representation in films and media through the years is particularly damning on the 90s. I at the back of my mind, I think I was aware, but until you see it sort of in a montage, you really forget how many 90s films had being sick at the prospect of having slept with someone that was trans as a punchline to jokes. So many films.
Ace Ventura caused it.
Yeah, that was one of them, yeah. There were quite a lot.
I think that this episode touches on ideas that most TV shows wouldn't in the 90s, in a way that Discovery and Picard, they don't go there. You know, they say that they've got representation, which is one thing, but then they have, kind of accidentally have right-wing ideology. Because the writers are very
Discovery does a bit in Series 3. I bear in mind I haven't finished Series 3, but...
It's the thing we're saying. It has quite explicit representation, and that's great. But I don't think it explores the ideas to do with it. I think this episode opened some doors that would mean Star Trek could explore different ideas. But Star Trek, in terms of sexuality, in the 90s, throughout the entire 90s, was lacking in terms of that representation. Even new Star Trek can be doing better, or particularly new Star Trek should be doing better.
There are excuses for 90s Star Trek. The studio and maybe a certain producer held them back when there were people involved, including Gene Roddenberry, who wanted to tell more progressive stories. I don't get that feeling from new Star Trek. I think that they want to have progressive casting, which is exactly what they should be doing, but that's not enough. Maybe I'm too left-wing for new Star Trek.
Thank you for listening. I hope you had fun.
Someone has to.
Who would have thought the podcast that isn't about ritual suicide would be the more depressing?
I don't know. I think we've had a couple of mainly serious podcasts. Wait till next time. We'll be talking about The Mind's Eye, so please join us for that one. Goodbye.
Goodbye.
Goodbye.